It's not really a secret that Cowboy Bebop is incredible. It's considered a gateway anime for a lot of people, myself included. Everything from the art style, to the world building, to the characters and voice acting. It's just great. But one episode in particular always stood out to me as being unique, and what I and a lot of other people already considered a very unique show. This episode is Pierrot Le Fou. And as to not embarrass myself with my French anymore, I'm going to refer to the episode as Pierrot and the character as Pierre. I vividly remember watching this episode even after I finished Cowboy Bebop. Even more so on a rewatch. With it being such a standout episode in an already incredible show, I wanted to take a look at how, off the bat, in this episode you can really tell something's different. Despite being the same art style, it almost feels like you turned on the wrong show with how deep and dark the shadows are. And a constant of why this episode is so scary is how it plays off your expectations of how a Cowboy Bebop episode is supposed to look, sound, and feel. This episode starts where we only see a shadow and a first-person perspective that unnaturally glides up a building to show off a desolate-looking skyline. Despite the city being alive and filled with light, the oppressive darkness from the sky keeps it from looking like you would normally expect from a Cowboy Bebop episode. The lack of color and use of shadows during this episode creates a dour tone that is not apparent in the other episodes. The color palette of Cowboy Bebop consists of a lot of bright reds, deep blues, yellows, and some bright whites. If we compare the color palette to when Pierre first shows up, there are the same colors from before, but they're significantly muted and almost swallowed by the monochromatic surrounding. It consists of a lot of drab tans, blacks, grays, and whites. If we compare a picture of how Spike is normally shown in an episode to how he is in this episode, you can see just how much more muted and washed out he is. Along with the color of the shadows, help to create this dark tone as well. Extremely dark shadows and pronounced shadows are cast over pretty much all of the characters, again almost swallowing them. In some cases even becoming the entire character, like this shot of Pierre where he's smiling after chasing Spike into the river. And what's interesting about this is they only use this type of color palette in the parts where Pierre is present, making the encounter with Pierre feel like a nightmare, as if to keep reminding us that this character is unlike any other in this series, and that his inner darkness is so potent that it suffocates everything around him. This all contributes to the tone of the episode as well. The tone of this episode is also quite different from a lot of other Cowboy Bebop episodes. Most are pretty quirky, heartfelt, or dramatic, and that's not to say there aren't serious episodes. But this episode is just downright horror, something that doesn't really happen in the rest of the series. Besides Ed, of course, most of the crew isn't that goofy. Even Spike doesn't have many quips to say, which straightens you up a bit because it feels off. The only other time in the show where we see Spike quipless, or not being as cool as we normally see him, is when it relates to Julia or Vicious. So for Spike to be this serious tells us what he thinks of Pierre. We still hold this serious tone when Jed is talking to his cop friend, interspersed with footage of a murder done by Pierre. Again, reinforcing this idea that the stakes are raised on this one. For once, Spike actually has to watch out. Something else that I think contributes to the tone of this episode is the music or lack thereof. Bebop is known for its soundtrack. It normally consists of jazz, some kind of slow western tunes, and some almost hymn-like music as well. Oddly enough though, this episode often has nothing. It'll be completely silent besides the diegetic sound in the scene. Again, playing off how you would normally perceive a Cowboy Bebop episode to sound. When there is music, it mostly consists of clinks and clanks, almost reminiscent of some Silent Hill music. I've always felt the most effective way to do a horror score is to limit it, and when it does appear, make the music not sound like music, but almost like your racing inner thoughts you would have if you were in this situation. Another good example of this is the score in The Shining, where it uses music that feels otherworldly, or like the 10 hours of metal pole dropping, the eerily distorted sounds of the amusement park mixed with the unsettling laughter and eventual crying of Pierre creates an absolutely unsettling atmosphere. That, along with the music that goes along with Pierre's flashback, gives you that feeling of discombobulation and like you're watching some feverish nightmare unfold. What really starts to cement this episode as terrifying is Spike. Notoriously, Spike is calm, cool, collected, especially when it comes to really anything like certain death. His coldest line in the show being,
"Whatever happens, happens."
It's constantly shown to us and reinforced to us even after this episode that Spike is not easily shaken. It's also shown how good Spike is in a fight. They even dedicate part of an episode to showing us how impressive his combat skills are. So when this shot shows up, you know something's seriously wrong. For the first and possibly only time in the series, Spike is genuinely scared. And for the first time, Spike was outright outmatched in a fight. It's been close between people like him and Vicious. This is not even close. Pierre juggles him like a Mortal Kombat combo. He barely escapes as the blast from a grenade launcher flings him into the river. Spike is truly faced with his own mortality for the first time in this series. At this moment, he thought he was gonna die, and worst of all, it wasn't on his terms. To have your main badass character be shook like this and barely escape with his life is a pretty straightforward way of showing us that Pierre is not someone to be messed with. That makes him dangerous, and that makes him scary. There are multiple times Spike is in a dire situation during the show. All of those times are because Spike is there willingly. The thrill of escaping death is what keeps Spike going. He isn't normally afraid because he's essentially died before, and not only that, but his near-death experiences are part of his job. He actively seeks them out to feel more alive. In this case, though, he's not on a bounty hunt or helping somebody. He's just walking out of a random bar and happens to run into something he shouldn't have. But then, if Spike was so terrified, why does he go back? This is pretty up to interpretation. In my view, it has to do with multiple things. I think the fact that Pierre almost took that agency away from him was a factor that, if not for chance, Spike would be dead at this moment. But the die weren't cast by him. There's also the factor of how Spike views living. This feeling as though he's trapped in this dreamlike purgatory where he died and is constantly seeing the past and the present at the same time. Everything feeling dreamlike, yet still grounded in reality of the world that they live in. Pierre is the only thing in this series that messes with that, because he feels like something out of a dream, out of a nightmare. He has to go back because it's arguably the closest thing he sees that merges the idea of this dreamlike state and being in reality. His dreamlike state sees the normal world as it always was. With Pierre, he feels like something out of a nightmare, but he's very real, which is why Pierre makes this episode so scary. Finally, we get to Pierre himself, the most terrifying part of this whole episode. From the first time we see Pierre, he feels completely unnatural in the way he smoothly and effortlessly glides across the sky as if some kind of unstoppable specter, as he brings this darkness and death with him wherever he goes. Pierre is also one of the two things in this show that I would consider supernatural-like. The other one being Wen, the guy who was stuck at like 7 for hundreds of years. His character design also plays off of your perceived notion of other characters. Like, he looks like the Penguin. Besides Colin Farrell's Penguin, he's normally not that scary, but his excruciating red eyes and his sharp, perfectly white teeth immediately show us he's a little different than the Penguin. And besides his bizarre movement, he's essentially unkillable. He is a fast, unrelenting killing machine that never lets up when chasing Spike. Spike blows up an entire city block to try to kill him, just for Pierre to come as if nothing happened. Imagine Mr. X from Resident Evil, but he can sprint and fly. He also has an arsenal with him. He's also extremely confident in what he can do. I mean, he invites Spike to meet him because the job isn't finished, but obviously he would have pursued him regardless. The few times he speaks, they're short and impactful, which I think makes Pierre stand out, because something else that works well with Pierre is the fun that he has in his terrorizing. A lot of classic villains or horror icons seem to enjoy their killing. A lot of them are loud though, either quipping or messing around with their victims, while Pierre goes straight for it, not messing around. Again, similar to something like Mr. Professor X or Nemesis. Where Pierre is still different from them is his mental state. As explained in the episode, he's mentally a child but physically a grown weapon of mass destruction, where he's grown to love the killing that he does. And as Jet says,
"There's nothing more pure and cruel as a child."
all of that wouldn't be enough, though, if the episode didn't end properly. At the end of the episode, Spike is able to incapacitate Pierre, and we're left with the wails of a grown man screaming for his mom, as it's juxtaposed with the smiling and happy mascots along with their distorted tune. And that's how Cowboy Bebop created a terrifying episode.